Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Margarita entered her son's room, surveyed it, sighed, smiled, and softly said, "I'll tidy up in here, Dani. Maybe I'll throw away something unnecessary. It's been 5 years, my dear. 5 years without you." 5 years ago, Margarita's son Daniel tragically died, and today she decided to go through his things, which she hadn't touched all these years. Everything remained the same as it was during his life. And even now, her hands didn't rise, unwilling to disrupt Daniel's established order. Nevertheless, she took a stack of books and notebooks from the shelf, placed them on the table, and started sorting through them. A bright card slipped out, apparently one that her son had saved for some past holiday. Margarita turned it over and read what her son had written by hand. "Mommy, I love you." The woman staggered. The pain, undiminished over 5 years, once again seared her heart. She leaned against the wall, but her legs gave way. She helplessly slid to the floor. She wanted to shout again, like back then, "No! This can't be!" But she already knew that wouldn't help release all the pain that had permanently settled in her soul. Her son, young, handsome, and healthy, had only turned 16 then. Life lay ahead of him long, happy, full of love and success in all areas. She, his mother, was sure of this, and so were all those around him, as Daniel was well liked. But it didn't happen. Was it fate or coincidence? After catching her breath from another blow of grief, Margarita once again looked around the room. "I'll never see you as an adult. And you would have turned 21 by now. Maybe everything would have changed in this room. Maybe you would have left home and started your own life, but no. Everything here remained the same as before. You'll never get married, I won't have grandchildren. I won't have anything. You left and never returned. And my time stopped." The cruel memory once again took Margarita back to that very day, their last hours together. Her son was getting ready to go on a hiking trip with his classmates. Daniel was a member of a hiking club. They often organized gatherings, and everything was fine. But they had never gone so far and for so long before. 2 weeks was just too much. Margarita helped her son pack, but an unexplainable worry gnawed at her heart. She didn't want to upset her son with her doubts. She tried to calm her heart with casual conversation. "Take spare socks. Why are you asking? What if you soak these? They won't take up much space, and you won't catch cold. Did you take the first aid kit? Good boy. Mom, I've gone on trips before. Why are you so worried?" Her son reassured her. And Margarita felt that he was holding back his irritation with all his might. But for so long the first time. "Believe me, all the moms of your friends are just as worried right now. Well, and very wrongly. I can't even imagine what will happen when I get drafted into the army. Oh, you're trying to drive me crazy. Don't talk about that for now. We'll worry about that when the time comes. And will Senor Sans be with you?" "Of course. He's our instructor. Don't worry, please. You'll be laughing at yourself in 2 weeks when I come back. And those nerve cells will be all gone. Or do you want me not to go and tell my friends that my mom didn't let me? I really want that, but I know you won't do it even for the sake of my nerve cells." Margarita tried to joke. That was the last day when she joked. She never had to laugh again. For a whole week, she tried to calm her worries, and she almost succeeded. Everything was fine with her son. Well, that's good. Only 7 days left, and maybe they'll come back earlier, even for just 1 day. Let's say they lose money, run out of food. No, let nothing like that happen. Let everything go according to plan. What would 1 day give me? Nothing. The main thing is that my son is okay, happy, and satisfied. At that time, Margarita was still married, meaning there was a stamp in her passport, a man, her son's father, but all their relationship had ended several years ago. She didn't want to remember that story. She survived the collapse of her personal life and chose to forget everything. Talk of divorce was ongoing, but first time, it was not advantageous for her husband for some reason. And when, it seems, a year before the tragedy, he started talking about it again, it was Margarita who asked, "What, are you in such a hurry? Let's let our son finish school peacefully." "I'm not in a hurry for anything. Isn't it time to end this already? Our son is not stupid, he understands everything perfectly. Anyway, I have no objections." Of course, their son understood that something was amiss between his parents, but they lived peacefully, maintaining friendly, neighborly relations. The apartment had 2 rooms. There was no extra space for separate living. There was only a screen that the former husband and wife put up at night, and during the day they hid it behind a wardrobe. The illusion of a normal, complete family remained, and both of them believed it was enough. Maybe even Daniel thought so. Dad lives at home. He just works a lot, sometimes even at night. What can be wrong about that? He didn't stay home that night, the start of the 2nd week of the hiking trip. Margarita talked to her son on the phone in the evening. Everything was fine. Daniel's cheerful voice reassured her, but only temporarily, as usual. Going to bed, she still thought about her boy sleeping in a tent in the forest. Even if there's no danger, it's still cold, damp, and mosquitoes. You never know what could happen. If I want to worry, nothing will stop me, the woman thought with a hint of mockery, trying to calm herself with this thought. It didn't work. But she still wanted to sleep, and she fell asleep. And towards dawn, she woke up as if from a shock. She sat up in bed, crying out an alarm. "Daniel!" She regained her senses, sat there, calming her heartbeat, not understanding what had happened. "What's wrong with me? Did I dream something? I can't remember. Or is this what a panic attack looks like? But why would that happen at night? Daniel! Oh God, what if something happened to my son? He's out there somewhere, far away." Panic overwhelmed her again. She got up, turned on the light, walked around the apartment, peeked into her son's room. Everything was fine, everything as usual. So, what was the matter? There was no thought of going back to sleep. She couldn't even sit still, she just walked around the apartment, as if trying to escape from some impending disaster. Unable to bear it, she grabbed her phone, surprised by the trembling in her hands. She wanted to call her son, but it was nighttime. He was sleeping and not alone in the tent. Well, fine then. I'll call anyway. Let him grumble, let him say whatever he wants, but I can't take it anymore. I can't wait until morning. She dialed the number, listened to the ringing for a long time until the mechanical voice said that the subscriber wasn't answering. I hear it myself that he's not answering. What do I do now? She asked aloud, trying to calm herself again. Everyone is still asleep. Tired, ran around. Fresh air, strong nerves. That's the youth. Not like me, jumping up in the middle of the night. Calm down. Call in an hour, listen to everything that's coming to you for this panic. She paced around the apartment for an hour. She saw that the sun had already risen, and the birds were singing. I guess it's okay to call now. Of course, I can, but it's scary. What if he doesn't answer again? Still, she took her phone, dialed the number, silently pleading to herself, Daniel, please, just answer. Say that everything's fine, and I won't call even once until you come back. He didn't answer. The morning turned into a nightmare if her son didn't answer, neither did any of his friends. The instructor Senor Sanza's phone was also silent. It was no longer like anything, but even those nightmarish hours of uncertainty were remembered later as happiness. There was still hope at that time. And closer to lunchtime, certainty arrived. Margarita learned that her son was no more. He had drowned at dawn. The true nightmare began. Margarita didn't quite remember what happened after the instructor's call informing her of the tragedy. She screamed, refusing to believe what had happened, and then suddenly froze, as if dying herself. By that time, it seemed her husband had returned. He called for emergency help. They gave her injections. The days might have turned into nights. Maybe the sun occasionally shone. All of that had lost its significance. Margarita saw her sobbing husband, heard his cries. You convinced him to join hiking club. Why did you let him join that club? Why did you let him go on that trip? Father's rescue was to cry and blame someone for son's death. He threatened to accuse all, prove Daniel's death fault or irresponsibility. Everyone alive, he's not. Why? Who's to blame? He sobbed. Margarita, all this was out of reach. She couldn't cry. She knew it was her fault, mother's fault. Knew everyone alive, Daniel's not, so nothing left for her. They tried to find guilty ones, but seems like it was no one's blame. On that day, all was, like always, answered to investigators' scared teens, first time confronted with death. No, nobody hurt Daniel. No, we didn't fight. Nobody planned swim at dawn. All slept. Daniel too lay, like all of us. He didn't say he wanted to swim. At dawn seemed, someone called for help, but we thought we just made up this noise and slept again. No one guilty. Daniel drowned because he himself went in water. That's it. Margarita didn't matter. She prepared for son's funeral, lived like on autopilot. Need inhale, exhale air, move legs, something eat and drink. Not think why, not look at closed door son's room. Just exist, because life goes on, though hers no more. They say sorrow brings people closer. Maybe, but, it seems, not every sorrow and not all people. With husband happened shared sorrow, worse which not exists, they lost own son. Maybe it was all because they lost each other even earlier. But after happened, husband and wife began avoid each other. They didn't cry on each other's shoulders, didn't hold hands. They, even remaining alone in apartment, avoided look at each other. This made experiences even more unbearable. Maybe, therefore, after some time after funeral, maybe on 9th day, maybe later. Who counted these days? Margarita saw husband packing things. Sorry, Mara, but it will be better this way. Maybe, I shouldn't leave now, but now our cohabitation lost all meaning. Don't worry, I don't claim this apartment. Divorce I'll file myself. If something needed, call me. Okay, fine, apathetically answered she. Heart, scorched by the main trouble of life, didn't respond to these words. It not took this insignificant loss. Everything lost all meaning, said she, when door behind her ex-husband closed. An apartment became completely empty and cold, like. Let me be same as you, my little son, she thought. I died too. I'm gone. Margarita found no support in surroundings. Before tragedy, she was a sociable woman. She had many friends, mere acquaintances. She never was alone. It seemed, even after what happened, she shouldn't remain in solitude, but remained. At first, upon learning of Margarita's immense sorrow, people rushed to her. They wanted to support, offer help, express sympathy, but instead of the young and beautiful, friendly and smart Margie, they were met by a dried-up, unfriendly old woman. This was completely understandable. Such grief in a person. People didn't know what to do, how to behave. Of course, many had experienced various troubles in life, many had suffered losses, but she was now in a state of complete world collapse. And she didn't need anyone in these terrifying moments. Yes, thank you, fine. Everything's all right. I hear you, she said, turned away, withdrew into herself. Nothing could be changed. The people understood that they couldn't help in any way. Moreover, Margarita couldn't currently accept any help. We're probably torturing her in vain, someone said. Better leave her alone. Let her go through everything that's happening herself, and then. What will happen afterwards is unknown, but people decided not to torment her with their sympathy, persuasions, and convictions. Moreover, some believe that grief is contagious, since all her friends were also mothers. All had children of approximately the same age, with their own hobbies, often carrying their own dangers. They were afraid to fall into this circle of misfortune that Margarita was invisibly surrounded by. She remained alone in this circle and was not at all upset about it. She felt calmer alone. After some time after the funeral, she returned to work, trying to at least outwardly pull herself together, but Margarita became different. So different that those who had known her for many years didn't recognize her. Not only did the unfortunate mother change externally, her character became completely different. She dutifully performed her tasks, didn't make mistakes. In that regard, everything remained the same, but in other aspects. Margarita understood that it was difficult for her colleagues to look at her, to be around her, because they continued to live. They had their own affairs, their own joys. The team was predominantly female, and whether you wanted it or not, women had to mention their personal, domestic matters and problems during work, talk about their children, husbands, sometimes joke and laugh. But with her, all of this was unthinkable. Colleagues found it sacrilegious to behave as nothing happened in front of a person who had lost, it seemed, everything. She hadn't smiled since her son was gone. Margarita herself understood how much it complicated the lives of the people who had always been pleasant to her. She couldn't change anything herself. Of course, after all, her grief would remain with her, and she would remain like that forever. But she mustn't spoil people's mood, shouldn't worsen the atmosphere at work, so she went to the manager and asked to be transferred to the dispatch room. "Why would you do that?" Hiding his eyes, the manager said, "You're handling your duties. Besides, the salary there is much lower." "I'm okay with it," replied Margarita, who had become very reserved. "You understand. It's hard for me, and it's hard for everyone when I'm around." "Maybe you're wrong about that. They say, on the contrary, when there's grief, it's easier to endure it together with others." The manager tried to convince her, but he understood everything perfectly well, and without further discussion, he signed the application. From then on, Margarita sat alone in a small room. She answered phone calls, handed out keys, accepted documents. It was harder, but even the thought of returning to the team didn't arise. She brought a book with her and read. Not fiction, no. There were stories about love, happiness, motherhood in any case. It was too unbearable. She started reading historical books. Information about the distant past was somewhat comforting. Many events happened in the world before she lived, before Daniel lived. People suffered, died, and the world continued to live on. Only for her, for Margarita, there was no continuing. She sat in a tiny chamber, resembling a coffin, where she had confined herself alive. Previously, another elderly woman, cheerful and sociable, worked here, and people often gathered near the dispatch room. Everyone wanted to chat with her. Now, however, anyone encountering Margarita's extinguished gaze hurried to leave as quickly as possible. After work, she went home to the empty and dead apartment, which was also steadily turning into a tomb. And then, unintentionally, Margarita realized that there was a corner there where life was still preserved, Daniel's room. It was as if the spirit of the young owner, who had left forever, still lingered there. Everything here was just as Daniel had left it: books, notes, pencils, discs, some other items whose names the mother either didn't know or had forgotten. She tried not to touch anything, just so as not to scare away Daniel's spirit. Once a week, she carefully wiped off the dust from horizontal surfaces, vacuumed the carpet, and that was it. And in the evenings, she spent hours in this room, conversing with her son as if he were alive. And how could she not rejoice in her solitude? If someone found out about this tendency of hers, they would think she had gone mad, they would force her to seek treatment, they might even decide to dismantle everything in Daniel's room. Even thinking about it was terrifying. No, everything would remain as it is there, and her son would remain there. She hadn't gone mad. He's just the only person she can talk to. Yes, he can't reply, but Margarita is sure he hears her and is present somewhere nearby. Even in the cemetery, where she also went almost every week, she didn't feel such unity with her son. There he was still dead, but here he remained alive. Perhaps he's the one who helped her survive, regain her senses, come to herself, simply not completely lose her mind in her grief. In the evenings, after sitting alone in her dispatch room, she would hurry home to talk to her son, tell him about everything that had happened to her during the day, complain, ask for advice. Yes, she didn't get an answer. She hadn't gone crazy, didn't hear voices, didn't see ghosts, but still, it was easier for her to have at least this kind of interaction with the world. Others, it seemed, had completely disappeared. A year went by, then a second. Many people began to gradually forget about the tragedy that had befallen Margarita. Their lives didn't stand still. And those who didn't know her before had no idea why this woman sat in the dispatch room perpetually gloomy, reserved. "When I see her, my mood spoils," a young colleague said capriciously. "Can't she make her face a bit simpler, even for the sake of working with people?" "And she doesn't seem that old," her friend replied. "But you know, they say someone close to her died or something. Everyone loses someone. I myself have buried so many relatives. My beloved grandmother died, and my uncle, my dad's brother, last summer. So what? I cried a bit and continue living, not spoiling anyone's mood with my sour face." Margarita overheard this conversation. Maybe it was meant for her to hear. She let out a heavy sigh. The grief still wouldn't let her go. If she managed to forget about her son for a moment, returning to thoughts of him brought even greater pain. She herself would be glad to distract herself, to forget. At some point, while getting ready for work, she decisively set aside her black blouse. After her son's death, she always wore black. She pulled out something she used to wear from the closet. Not colorful, not bright, but not black either. She put it on. It turned out that clothing could also affect her mood and facial expression, but did she have the right to forget her mourning? Wouldn't she offend her son's memory this way? Wouldn't she show people that she's ready for life when she wasn't ready at all? However, from that day on, Margarita changed somewhat. She decided that she had no right to be a fright to people and to ruin their mood. "I'm not old yet," the woman thought. "Those around me might call me the harbinger of death or a witch, and maybe with my appearance, I'm actually offending my son's memory. He probably wouldn't be happy to know what his mother has turned into. He loved it when I looked nice." In the evening, of course, she talked about this with Daniel. "What do you think, son, shouldn't I do a bit of makeup before work?" she asked aloud and shivered. There were no voices, but suddenly a little bird landed on the windowsill for a second, hopped up and down a few times, and flew away cheerfully. "Well, yeah. Perhaps I should," the woman decided. And gradually, people stopped avoiding the dispatch room where no longer sat a gloomy old woman, the mere sight of whom sent shivers down their spine, but rather a not very young, not very cheerful, simply serious and reserved woman. What could they do? Such people exist too. She looks after appearance, dresses decently, and goes to work diligently. So, everything must be fine with her. The thought of seriously changing her life didn't cross Margarita's mind, as she believed that changes weren't meant for her. One spring day, as she was leaving the cemetery after placing flowers on her son's grave, a man approached her. He wasn't old, around 50. Margarita had noticed him at this sad place before, and she smiled sympathetically and understandingly. "Yes, that's how fate is, such is life," he sighed. "I often see you here because I'm here often myself. I visit my ones. They're all here, parents. My wife passed away a year ago, and she's buried here next to our daughter, who was just a baby. That's life. What can we do?" Margarita sighed in response. She didn't want to talk about who she visited. It didn't concern the man. And he, it seemed, understood that and started talking about something else, the good weather, the upcoming summer, plans. Margarita already regretted responding to the first sentence. Maybe she should have just nodded and walked away. She didn't want to talk because she had no plans. And now, it seemed like a conversation was starting, and she needed to either continue it or stop it. And how do you stop it if he keeps talking? They walked outside the gates, and the man unexpectedly invited her to a cafe. There's one nearby. It seems to be specifically created for people like us. They sometimes hold memorial events there, and you can also just sit there. A quiet, peaceful place, no cheerful music, no dancing, and other such distractions. Would you mind? I don't mind, Margarita found herself saying unexpectedly. She was very thirsty. She had forgotten to bring water with her, and she had been at the cemetery for about 2 hours. It was getting quite hot. She certainly hadn't been thinking about cafes. She had planned to enter the first store she came across and buy a bottle of water. She had no interest in even the quietest places, and she was least disposed to conversations. But now that she had agreed, she had to go along and force herself to maintain the conversation. They got to know each other in the cafe. The widower's name was Victor. It was clear that he was a good man, albeit with a difficult fate. They talked about life, their troubles. They left after an hour. Victor suggested exchanging phone numbers, meeting next time not at the cemetery, but somewhere else. I'm sorry, Victor, I won't be able to. I simply don't have the strength, really. I go through the motions, I talk out of obligation, I force myself to maintain a normal appearance just so I don't scare people away. I don't want to deceive you. I can tell you right away, I'm not inclined to any relationships, friendships. I severed all my previous connections not to make new ones. You're mistaken, Victor sighed, smiling sadly. Our troubles are serious, of course, but we still have to live, wouldn't you agree? At least for the sake of preserving the memory of our departed loved ones. We do preserve their memory in our own ways, of course. You're just stuck in the past, Margie, Victor said, and with that, they parted ways without any promises or exchange of phone numbers. Margarita wasn't at all saddened by this. She even breathed a sigh of relief. She couldn't react to any new person right now the way she couldn't react to the old ones. Yes, she remained in the past because she had nothing else left except that very past. She wasn't upset even after encountering Victor again near the cemetery sometime later, as he was talking to another woman who also visited the place frequently. And so, after 5 years of her accustomed solitude, Margarita found herself without a job. She wasn't fired, her position was eliminated. They no longer needed a dispatcher in the not very profitable enterprise. Many were affected by the downsizing, and Margarita was among the first. As a result, she lost a small but stable income. She had no significant savings, and she needed to live on something. She had no one to talk to about this, no one to ask for advice. Margarita remained completely alone, and it was her own doing, of course. She didn't blame anyone. And who could have advised her in this situation? She never had acquaintances capable of finding her a new job, negotiating with someone, providing some substantial assistance beyond sympathy, and that was the last thing she needed. However, she could talk about her troubles with her son, her beloved and only conversationalist, her advisor for the past few years. He couldn't say anything to her, but she could speak her mind and explain her thoughts on the matter. Perhaps, by speaking everything out loud, she would come to some final decision. In the evening, she entered her son's room, took her usual seat, a chair placed beside his bed. She sighed and began. Well, Dani, my life has completely lost its meaning. I left my job, or rather, I was let go. Downsizing. I turned out to be an unnecessary staff member both at work and in this world in general. Yes, today I received my employment record and my final pay, and I won't need to go anywhere tomorrow morning. It's frightening, my son. I'm not exactly needed at work, but what about without it? How will I pay for the apartment? How will I even live? And do I need to live? If only you could take me with you, Daniel. Maybe there, we'll find some place for me. After that, she decided to tidy up her son's room, to go through his things for the first and perhaps the last time. That's when she found that same card, "Mommy, I love you." She lowered herself onto the chair again, clutching the card to her chest, and tears flowed from her eyes for the first time in a long while. "I love you too, my son. The only person who loved me. The only one who will never leave, even now. Why are you silent, my dear? Give me some kind of sign." She looked out the window, wondering if another bird would appear again. Her son wouldn't give her any signs. It seemed that in order to talk to him, she would have to go where he is now. Although no one knows whether a meeting is possible there and whether there is anything there at all. Well, there's definitely nothing here except sorrow, longing, and deprivation. Now I know that for sure, Margarita thought and left the room, still clutching the card to her chest. She went to the kitchen, turned on the kettle, heated up some food. She ate mechanically, washed the dishes. The fact that she wasn't fully aware of what she was doing convinced her of the futility of her existence. It can't be said that she had already made a fatal decision. Margarita was in no condition to make any decisions right now. She felt very tired, very drained, so she hurried to bed and fell asleep instantly. And in her dream, she had a conversation with her son. Probably, for the first time, such a clear and meaningful one. She didn't really see Daniel, his image was blurry, but his voice was recognizable. And he spoke to his mother like an older, experienced person. Maybe that's how it was. "You're not alone, Mom. Can't you feel that I'm always with you?" "Of course, you can feel it, I see that. It's just a pity that you don't realize how difficult it is for me because you can't let me go. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting, it doesn't mean parting with me forever. It means not allowing negative thoughts. It means living on, continuing your life. Mine has ended, but yours continues. It was supposed to continue if you allowed it. And you keep living the same day that's long gone. But I can't do otherwise, Daniel. Everything has ended for me. It ended then and it ended completely today. I'm telling you, I have no reason to live anymore," she tried to convince her son. "If you leave now, neither you nor I will ever find peace, Mommy, and we'll never see each other again. You can't imagine how much harm you'll do to my soul if you do what you're contemplating. But if you start living and find happiness, I'll be happy too. I can't explain to you what that's like, but believe me, I already know a lot. All you have to do is pray for me and allow yourself to be happy." "But how can I be happy without you, Daniel? I'm always with you, you know that. Live for me, be happy for me, and I will help you. I see that you're struggling, and I will help you. You'll be happy, Mom. The love that you wanted to give to me while I was alive, maybe even to my children, now lies as a dead weight, unnecessary to anyone. Do you want to bury it with me and yourself? But in doing so, you'll destroy that love. It's better to give it to someone who needs your love, and I will help you find that person." "What person?" "I don't need anyone but you," Margarita exclaimed and woke up. Her face was wet from tears. The dream was so real that she had no doubt she was talking to her son, and she remembered the conversation perfectly. Still, the woman couldn't understand how her son would help her now, and who could she love if not in the same way as Daniel, but just love? She couldn't even imagine it. She walked around the apartment again, looking for signs of her son's presence. If they were talking like that, maybe he was really here. Or maybe I'm really going crazy. That wouldn't be surprising. 5 years of this kind of life wouldn't leave anyone a normal person. The morning began the gray, gloomy, cold morning of late autumn. Through the window, Margarita saw people hurrying to their jobs. She didn't have to go anywhere. These hurrying people might envy her for staying in the warm house. And she envied those who had somewhere to go. She decided not to stay home, to go to the cemetery, to talk to her son again there. When she went out, she noticed that a fine cold rain was falling, and as usual, she had forgotten her umbrella at home. But she didn't want to go back, and hoping that the rain would soon stop, Margarita pulled her scarf over her head. Approaching the grave, she sighed, placed her hand on the cold, wet metal of the fence. Would Daniel find something to say to her today? She didn't hear anything, but suddenly it seemed that her son's hand rested on hers. It didn't frighten her, but brought a gentle smile. I'm letting you go, Daniel. I really want you to be well where you are now. For your sake, I'm ready for anything. The rain intensified. The sky grew darker. It seemed like night was falling, although it wasn't even noon yet, and Margarita's heart was bright. She fulfilled her son's request, and she wouldn't cling to him anymore. She would live her life. At least she would learn to do so, as she hadn't lived in real time for so long. She looked at her son's photograph on the monument, smiled back at his smile. You'll always be with me, right? You promised, she said softly. And you'll help me, right, Daniel? I'm going home now, going to live, my dear. Thank you for showing me the right path. The woman walked towards the exit. As she walked along the path past the monuments, she involuntarily looked at the photographs, gazed at the life dates. Of course, there were elderly people who had passed away in their time, but there were also so many young ones who still had a life to live. And how many parents were left alone and suffering, just like her, Margarita? How terribly sad all of this was. She looked at the beautiful and youthful faces, and her heart constricted with pain for those who had departed and with sympathy for those who stayed on this earth. How do parents endure this sorrow? Just like she did? Where do they find solace? There was no one at the cemetery at this time. It was a working day, and the bad weather wasn't the best time for visiting the cemetery. She first mistook a solitary figure near one of the fences for a bag of trash someone had left behind. Probably they were cleaning up around the graves for winter, and something was left behind. But as she got closer, she was surprised to realize it was a person. A little boy was squatting in front of a monument, leaning against the fence. And he sat there without moving. It was strange and even frightening. What are you doing here? Margarita called out to him as she approached. Nothing, the boy answered in a slightly hoarse voice. You can't sit like that. You'll catch a cold. Why did you come here? Do you have someone buried here? Her heart squeezed even more at the sight of the lonely child. Mom and Dad. They died in a car accident, the little boy said. That's where the sorrow was, because the child couldn't have been older than 7. Maybe even younger. And he was sitting here alone on the grave of his parents. Was it for her, an adult, an independent woman, to lament fate? My son is buried here. He drowned at the age of 16, the woman said for some reason. 16 is a lot. I'm only 7, the boy said. That's not little either, to know that you shouldn't sit on cold ground. You might catch a cold. Get up, don't sit. What's the difference? Nobody needs me anymore. How can you say that? My dear, you have some relatives, right? Did you run away from home? I don't have any relatives, and I ran away from the orphanage because it's bad there. I don't want to go there. The big boys, they bully the little ones. They make them smoke and steal, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to the orphanage. It's better if I die, and they bury me right here. You're out of your mind. Margarita said in horror, not realizing that she had had similar thoughts not so long ago herself. But she could somehow explain her own thoughts, but for a 7-year-old child. Let's get up, let's go from here. The boy obediently stood up, and Margarita saw that his face was not only wet from the rain but also from tears. She hugged the child's shoulders. You're a good kid for not listening to those who teach you bad things. Such actions won't lead to anything good. Don't cry, you must be happy for the sake of your parents. They'll see that you're doing well, and they'll be happy too. Up in the sky? The child asked, looking up at her with trusting eyes. Yes, up there. And they will help you, you'll see. But for now, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Margarita Cano. You can call me Aunt Mara. And what's your name? I'm Gabby. Well, now we've met. Let's go to a cafe. There's a good one nearby. We'll warm up there a bit, have some hot coffee, and then we'll see. Give me your hand. The boy trustingly placed his cold hand in hers, equally cold and wet, and those two icy, damp palms began to warm each other. They entered an empty cafe. Margarita ordered tea and pastries. Gabby began warming his hands against his cup. What does we'll see mean? He asked. If it's back to the orphanage again, I don't want to. I'd rather go back there, to the cemetery. Wait, little one. What cemetery? Why do you need it? After all, you do want to bring joy to your parents, right? I do want to. But if they can help, but don't help, then what else can I do? Not all at once, little Gabby. Why aren't you eating your pastry? Are you hungry at all? Margarita was surprised. No, I don't want to eat. I ran away right after breakfast. They feed us well there. I ate everything just in case, because I didn't know when I'd get to eat again. And now I don't really want the pastry either, but I'll eat it. You see, that means there's something good in your orphanage, they feed you well. And you'll have to go back there, there's nowhere else to go. I'll take you there. You know, I'd gladly take you home with me. I live alone now. But I can't do that, because you're not my boy. They'll just accuse me of kidnapping. Oh, come on. Gabby didn't believe her. Who would care about me there? They won't even notice I'm gone. You're mistaken. They've probably already reported it to the police. They could see you here with me, and I'll get into trouble. No, let me take you back to the orphanage. I'll tell the caretaker not to let anyone hurt you, and I'll come visit often, as soon as I can. And then I'll make arrangements. Maybe I can convince them. Perhaps I can take you to visit me. If you like it at my place, maybe they'll let me adopt you. Really? The boy couldn't believe it. They say they don't adopt older kids like me. They prefer little ones. Others might not adopt older kids. But someone like you is exactly what I need. Actually, it's better they don't adopt you. At least nobody will take you away except me. Because we're already friends, right? Well, yes, probably. I like you, the boy smiled. And I like you too. You don't have any relatives? No, everyone has already died. Grandma, Grandpa, they're buried there too. They say there's some uncle, but I've never seen him, and he lives who knows where. He might not even know about me. He's my dad's brother, but I don't even remember if he ever visited us. I think he lived in another city. Well, there you go. That means no one will stop me from adopting you. I have an apartment and, I'm sure, soon I'll have a job too. I don't have it yet. And then we'll be together. I have a spare room for you. That's where my son Daniel used to live. Her heart jolted again. Do I really have to give Daniel's room to someone else? Well, yes. It seems this is Daniel's help, and it's beginning. Now this little one needs me. And there's no need to worry that Daniel's order will be disturbed. Everything is right and good. Gabby, warmed up and having had some sweets, perked up a bit and confidently showed Margarita the way back to the orphanage. Aunt Mara, are you not tricking me? Will you really visit me? He asked anxiously. Of course not. I won't trick you, and I will definitely visit. And what are you going to say to my caretakers now? Let's not tell them that I tattled, that I said boys teach bad things. They really do teach bad things, but being a tattletale is bad. You can just say I missed my mom and dad and went to the cemetery. All right, let's say that. I'll have to talk to the caretakers anyway. I need to arrange for them to allow me to visit you. I hope we'll really be together soon. Maybe by New Year's. Wow, New Year's isn't soon, Gabby said. Of course, for a child, that's not soon, but in reality, it was only about 3 months away. Time will fly by quickly, Margarita reassured him. They arrived at the orphanage, went inside. Ah, there he is, our little traveler. exclaimed a woman who seemed to be the on-duty caregiver, addressing Margarita. "Where did you find him? Thank you for bringing him. He's been with us for not long. He can't get used to everything yet." "It's hard to get used to something like this," Margarita sighed. "But please don't scold him too much. He's a good boy. He was at the cemetery, by the grave of his parents." "Oh, what a tragedy. Well, what can we do? Don't we understand anything?" No one was planning on scolding him too much. "Are you the caregiver? I wanted to talk to you specifically about Gabby." "Wait right here in the hallway. I'll take him to his group, let him change clothes. He's all wet. Soaked his feet. Well, you see, who's going to deal with your cold?" "I'm not sick. I'm tough," Gabby replied independently. Margarita waited for the caregiver and explained her request. "You understand, this boy really touched me. I'm all alone now. My own son died 5 years ago, my husband left. Before, I never even thought about anything like this, but now that I've seen Gabby, I've decided that I need to adopt a child. Otherwise, life will be completely meaningless. I'm only 43 years old, which means I might have to live for a long time. When I imagine that it will be like this." "Yes, you're right, of course. Regarding adoption, it's better for you to talk to the head of the orphanage. And also about visitations. Just don't change your mind. Because there are people who see an orphan child, get all sentimental, promise them the world, but then they go back home, think it over, and decide why do they need someone else's child. And the child waits, believing immediately. Some poor kids wait for years, and they've been forgotten long ago. Oh no, believe me. That won't happen with me. I've been thinking for 5 years about why I'm living. Turns out, the answer could be right here. Maybe Gabby needs my love and care precisely for this reason. Maybe it's worth living for him." With the head of the orphanage, Margarita obtained permission to visit Gabby, but there could be problems with adoption. The main condition was a stable and official job, which Margarita didn't have for the past 2 days. "I'll definitely find a job. I have everything I need, an apartment, all the necessary documents. I have no debts." "That's good. Then look for a job for now, and we'll see how it goes. They'll inspect your apartment, provide an evaluation of whether it's suitable for a child to live in. And then, I suppose, there shouldn't be any major obstacles. He doesn't have any relatives. There's some uncle, his father's brother, but his whereabouts are unknown. He hasn't made any claims for Gabby, and I doubt he ever will." On her way home, Margarita felt elated. Perhaps a new life, full of meaning and love, would start for her soon. She was already thinking about what to buy for Gabby for his first visit, how to rearrange Daniel's room. And work. Yes, work was definitely needed. The sooner, the better. But where to find it and what kind? However, Margarita didn't have any specific requirements. She was willing to take any job, as long as the salary wouldn't hinder her adoption of the child. The woman mentally reviewed her acquaintances, thinking about who she could ask for help. There weren't many such people. Honestly, there were none at all. When she left her previous job, some of her coworkers cried because they didn't know where to look for new work. "I'll probably have to look through job ads," Margarita decided. "Some people seem to get lucky. And I'm sure I'll get lucky too." Was it fate itself that sided with Margarita, because she soon found a job? Her former boss, with whom she had worked for many years, suddenly called her the very next day after meeting Gabby and asked if she had found a job yet. No, not at all. When could I have managed that? I just quit. Well, what are your plans? You probably want to take some time off to rest? No, not at all. I don't have time for rest. And I'm not that tired. I really need a job. Very well. I want to offer you something. I've also left our old workplace, joined another company. My friend founded it. I'll be the head of a department there, and I want to hire people I know well. You're one of them. I hope you don't mind. The salary will be decent, much better than what you had in dispatch, and the prospects are quite promising. Thank you so much, Senor Delgado. I didn't expect this, really. I didn't know where to turn. Still, there's age and some shortcomings I have. What age? Your age is just right. We'll work on the shortcomings, don't worry. Well, I'm kidding, of course. I know all your shortcomings, and most importantly, your strengths. I hope everything will work out for us. I really hope so too. By the way, you will probably provide me with a reference if needed? What's the question? Absolutely. In short, everything was falling into place as perfectly as possible. Soon, Margarita had a good job and a stable income. Strangely enough, her strength seemed to have increased as well. She did a thorough cleaning of Daniel's room, which would soon become Gabi's. She visited her future little son quite regularly, and after a couple of weeks, she was allowed to take him out for weekends. Wow! Is this going to be my room? The boy exclaimed with joy. That's just awesome. I used to have a room too, but it was connected to a bigger one, not separate. A separate room is so much better, right? And it even has a balcony. Wow! Yes, but you can't go out on the balcony for now. I sealed the doors so there wouldn't be drafts. Later we'll get different frames and doors. Maybe we'll even glaze the balcony. Then you'll be able to go out in winter too, but that's for next year. Cool. You know, Aunt Mara, if you adopt me, will it be like having a mom? Well, yes, of course. Don't you like that? I do. But you know what I don't like? I don't know how I'm going to call you Mom. I had a different mom before. Can I put her picture on the wall and Dad's too? Of course you can. You can just call me Aunt Mara. I'm not expecting you to call me Mom. It's good that you remember your own mom. And you. You won't be upset? Well, how could I be upset, sweetie? My son was named Daniel, and you're Gabi. I'm not going to call you Daniel, am I? Well, yeah. I really loved my mom and dad, and they loved me too. I couldn't believe for a long time that they wouldn't be around anymore. Did you love your Daniel a lot? The boy cautiously asked. Very much. But you know, Gabi, at some point, I realized that he didn't disappear anywhere. He's always with me. You understood that sooner. Maybe because kids are more perceptive. They tried not to talk about these quite delicate topics. They discussed the future more, how they would live when they were together. Due to the death of his parents, Gabi didn't start first grade in September. He would become a first grader next year, but Margarita knew that the boy already knew how to read and write his mom had taught him. She was pleased. The child wouldn't have any problems with studies. Maybe they wouldn't have problems at all, at least initially. She was aware of the difficulties that come with adolescence. And she would have to raise the child alone, without a father. Neither the woman nor the boy had any doubts that they would be together. Margarita felt happy and needed for the first time in years. Before going to sleep, she was no longer living in the forever gone past. At times, she would drift into thoughts about the future, which promised not only happiness. It turned out that upcoming challenges could also bring joy, because they were part of life. Margarita felt alive and rejoiced in the thought that her son probably found it easier where he was now. "Are you happy, my son?" she would ask Daniel before bed and feel his responding smile. The adoption documents for Gabi were almost complete. She had obtained all the necessary permissions and was waiting for the day when Gabi would finally be at home with her. Everything was prepared, and each time Margarita drove to the orphanage for another meeting with her future son, she would think that soon she wouldn't need to visit this place anymore. But on one of her visits before Gabi's arrival, the director came out to meet her, inviting her to her office for a conversation. Maybe she should have been pleased about this. Perhaps the director wanted to discuss the upcoming adoption, talk about some details. However, the expression on the woman's face was far from joyful, it even seemed somewhat guilty. In her office, she gestured for Margarita to sit down at the table and held up her hand to stop her when she started speaking. "Wait, Margarita Cano. I have news for you, and it's probably not very pleasant." "What happened? Is something wrong with Gabby?" Mara exclaimed in alarm. "No, not at all. He's fine, don't worry. His biological uncle has appeared, though. He wants to take the boy with him." This news was like a bolt from the blue. Margarita hadn't expected anything like this. In the first moment, she didn't even grasp the full scope of the tragedy. "What do you mean, take the boy? Will they allow him to do that? I've gathered all the documents, met all the conditions." "Yes, that's true, but unfortunately, you haven't completed the adoption process yet, and the advantage still lies with the biological relative. He has also gathered all the necessary documents and has a legal right to the child." "For heaven's sake, what right does he have? He doesn't even know this child, and we've been together for several months now. We're already making plans for our life together. He already considers my home his own, not just me." And suddenly, some uncle shows up who didn't want to know about him before. It's not quite like that. He had his circumstances that prevented him from appearing earlier. So, he couldn't show up for almost a year? And now what? What does Gabby himself say about this? "I don't believe he'll just go with a completely unfamiliar person, even if he's a blood relative, and reject me. The thing is, Gabby is not yet 10 years old, and his opinion won't be seriously taken into account. The person who wants to take him is his close relative, his biological uncle. Meanwhile, you are a stranger, unfortunately. No, I refuse to understand anything about this. So, a child can be given away to anyone without his consent, based on some kind of kinship document, and they will refuse a person with whom they have a spiritual bond, practically unity. That, you must admit, is inhumane. I just can't believe this." Margarita was on the verge of tears from desperation. She understood that her pleas meant very little, and the director of the orphanage held little sway over the situation, which she immediately confirmed. "You know, I agree with you to some extent, but I have to act according to the letter of the law, not just personal feelings. However, don't lose hope completely. Nothing is final yet. It's entirely possible that the decision will be in your favor. And it's also possible that it won't be. But can I at least see Gabby today? I'm sorry, but no. It's not my decision, and it's made in the best interest of the child." Margarita understood that pleading, proving her point, convincing in this situation was utterly useless. She asked the headmistress to inform her about the final decision of the guardianship authorities. She bid her goodbye and left. Snow was falling outside. It came down in soft, fluffy flakes. Children love this kind of snow. She and Daniel used to go for walks in such weather, and it was wonderful. And then she dreamed of walking like this with Gabby. Today, they could have taken a stroll, catching snowflakes on their tongues, admiring the snow-covered trees. She could have warned her son not to play in the snow for too long. But she's walking alone now. The snow covers her slumped shoulders, clings to her eyelashes, melts, mixing with tears that now, it seems, she has no need to hold back. Mascara smears, probably flowing down her cheeks. Well, let it. Who sees her now? Who cares about her? Luda sat down on the snow-covered bench. She had no strength to go further. Empty again, no hope again. Why do I lose everyone? She mentally asked, raising her eyes to the sky. Why do they take everything from me? It would be better not to give anything then, since I'll have to lose even the last thing. She lowered her head, covering her face with her hands. Sat quietly, covered in snow. Señorita, are you feeling unwell? Can I help you with something? A pleasant male voice sounded over her. Now here comes the sympathizer. He'll pity her, comfort her, and then, who knows, maybe something will work out. You're wrong, mister, the woman thought, raising her head. I'm not a señorita, and there's nothing for us to achieve, and you won't help me with anything. No one will help me anymore. She wanted to get up, but still had no strength. The stranger, a middle-aged man, handed her a pack of paper napkins. Well, that was a gesture of sympathy, and Luda accepted the napkins with gratitude. She started to tidy herself up, and the man was still there, standing nearby. What happened to you? I apologize, I don't want to pry into your soul, but you're killing yourself too much. Is it worth it? Often people go through things, and after some time, looking back, realize that the trouble wasn't worth it. Everything is solvable, everything can be fixed. Not everything. I'm sorry, but my troubles are such that you can't call them solvable or fixable. If you don't want to hear something utterly hopeless, you'd better turn around and go your own way. Thanks a lot for the napkins. Consider that you've already earned some karma points. She finally got up from the bench, walked down the street, thinking that the man would stop, but he didn't. He walked behind her. The snow kept falling. It was quiet, and nothing hindered them from talking. No, I'm sorry, now I definitely can't just turn around and leave, the man said firmly. I have to listen and find out what happened. Believe me, sometimes just talking about your problems is already half of their solution. Trust me, it's not mere curiosity. Well, fine. Let's say you're a priest, or a wizard, or some trendy therapist who believes that any problem can be talked away, chatted about, and forgotten. I'll repeat, if at any point during my story you turn around and hurriedly walk away, I won't consider you a coward or a runaway. You're not obligated to listen to such confessions. So, I'll start. 5 years ago, my son died, the only one, beloved, the most wonderful person. I was left all alone. How do you suggest I fix that? Right, I can't. I remained alive. For 5 years, I somehow breathed, got up in the morning, went to work. My husband left me right after the funeral. He considered our union exhausted. I don't know how he's living now. I'm not interested in that. 5 years I lived my life. Transferred to another job, where less need to interact with people, where no need to upset them with my appearance, infect them with my unhappiness, but even that job ended. I got laid off. About my husband, as I've said, I forgot. Recently managed to find another job. And now, turns out, I don't need this either, because some time ago, seemed I could live on and be needed. Met a boy, a little orphaned boy, whose parents died. Somehow, we immediately became friends, even loved each other. I almost decided to adopt him. All documents collected, apartment in order, ready to meet the young new owner. Everything seemed fine. Could start anew and be happy. Well, yes, probably. But judging by your mood, something hindered. Listen, nice cafe over there. Let's go in, continue our conversation there. Let's not freeze. Although, honestly, not that cold. Wonderful weather today. Yes, something hindered, continued Margarita, as they sat in the cafe at the table and made an order. With my Gabby. Yes, already considered him mine. Suddenly, some blood relative appeared. Wasn't around since the boy's parents died, or maybe earlier. Don't know. Gabby himself doesn't remember. And now, all of a sudden, appeared and wants to take the boy for himself. And all advantages on his side, as he's a blood relative. Gabby not even 10 yet, so his opinion doesn't count, too young. And me, consider me practically absent from this story. Just a distant woman. Wanted to adopt, but didn't work out. And now won't even see the boy I've grown so fond of. Margarita's voice quivered again. She felt she would soon start crying again. Tears don't help anything. Nothing helps her troubles. Well, why won't you meet? Maybe this uncle won't forbid you from meeting. He lives in another city, and unclear whether he'll need these meetings. Perhaps he himself wants to adopt the child, in other words, become his father, and has a wife or fiancée willing to become a mother. So, again, I'm an unnecessary element. Need to talk to the uncle for that. Different city, not another country. Still can meet, and going there less than a day. How do you know? Margarita was surprised. I am that very uncle. Andres is my name. Sorry for not introducing myself right away, but even I didn't immediately understand who you are and what the conversation was about. I won't let you and Gabby part forever. Promise you that. Thank you. But why didn't you take the boy right away? Why decide to show up only now? Didn't you know about his parents' death, that they placed the boy in an orphanage? Of course, I knew. From the very beginning, I thought I needed to do it. But I also had circumstances, you understand? Unfortunately, not everything depends on us and our desires. You surely know that yourself. My circumstances weren't as tragic as yours, but still, I couldn't adopt a child. I was going through a divorce with my wife, actually. The divorce was tough. We lived together for 15 years, no children. Actually, there was nothing. I don't even know why we lived together. Then we realized we couldn't stand each other and couldn't love each other. We decided to divorce. The divorce, I repeat, was not easy. Plus, exchanging the apartment. I lived wherever I could for half a year. Finally, everything got sorted out. There's an apartment, quite suitable for a child to live in. Gabby is my only relative, that's how it turns out. His father was my younger blood brother. Now, besides Gabby, I have no one. And I have no one besides him. And living now is utterly pointless. Why do you say that? We'll come up with something. And don't say you have no reason to live. Live for yourself, for the memory of your son, for Gabby, finally. I've met him more than once. The boy only talks about you. I see how attached he is to you. You're very important to him, Margie. Maybe we didn't meet for nothing? Margarita looked up at the man and for the first time really observed him. Roughly her contemporary, quite handsome, a solitary person. What does maybe we didn't meet for nothing mean? From her point of view, it would be better not to meet, better if this Uncle Andres never appeared. What could they come up with? How could they divide one boy? How would they travel to each other's cities? Well, yes, less than a day's journey, and the ticket probably isn't that expensive. Such sad thoughts were in Margarita's head, but at the same time, something completely different was growing inside her soul. She couldn't understand it herself. Andres also couldn't help but notice the sparks that ignited in her eyes from time to time. She seemed to be trying to remember something, some feelings that hadn't visited her for a long time. I understand, Margarita, what you're thinking about. You don't want to part with Gabby, and you understand that seeing each other will be quite strained now. You have work, he'll have school. I have a job too, by the way. We won't even be able to visit each other once a week. And for people who are dear to each other, meeting once a month is too little. Maybe I should move to your city? There's not much keeping me here. I'm originally from here. I moved there for work. Yes, work is very important. But I could find a place just as good here. It was evident that Andres was grappling with his thoughts, trying to find a viable solution. Let me offer my version then, Margarita said. Just listen, please don't interrupt. Let go of the idea of taking the boy. I think Gabby himself won't be against it, and nothing will change for you. You'll remain his uncle, his blood relative, and I'll become his foster mother. Then we can start thinking about living arrangements, visits, communication. Whether you move to our city, or I to yours, is also possible, albeit more complex. But for the sake of the child, I'm ready for anything. And with time, I believe, the situation will normalize. How can I suddenly just let go? Andres couldn't understand. You won't be giving up on him. The boy will live with me. He's young. Right now, he needs a mother more than a father. Isn't that right? After all, I have experience with a child of his age. And you can visit anytime. I won't stand in the way. And when Gabby grows a little, maybe he'll want to live with you himself, and I, again, won't object. Do you think that's an option? The man asked, bewildered. Why not? I'm grateful to you for not wanting to separate us, even being willing to move for it. But think for a moment how much time and effort it would take. And the child will keep living in the orphanage? And if there's no moving involved, then it will end up just as I said initially, with me remaining a complete stranger to Gabby. Maybe you're right. But it's also difficult for me to suddenly step back from taking my nephew. I think we should do this. Let's talk to Gabriel together, explain the situation to him. I think my version would suit him better. Yes, you're right. We probably need to talk to Gabriel himself. The next morning, they headed to the orphanage. This time, both candidates for adopting the boy were allowed in. They called for Gabby. Seeing both his uncle and Aunt Mara, he rushed towards them, spreading his arms wide for a hug, embracing them both. You both came at the same time. That's so great. I wanted you both to come together. Then he quieted down, puzzled. Aunt Mara, do you know that Uncle Andy also wants to take me with him? I know, Gabby, but let's talk about it a little later. Let's go, let's all take a walk together. There's so much snow piled up. Margarita replied. They had a wonderful walk, and they decided to have a serious conversation at a cafe. During the walk, Gabby, distracted from his serious thoughts, grew puzzled again. With big eyes, he looked questioningly from one adult to the other. But he didn't rush to ask questions. When the boy had a snack, Margarita initiated the difficult conversation. Gabby, your uncle and I are thinking about who you'll be with now. You know me better and I already have a home, but Andres is your real uncle, your closest relative. So, Aunt Mara, are you refusing me? Gabby's eyes filled with tears. I will never refuse you. Just understand, you can't live in two places at once, can you? That's why we came together, to ask you. Who would you like to live with? We both love you very much. We both need you, but the final decision is yours, Margarita finally said. And both adults felt ashamed for putting the child in such a position. Gabby sat there, bewildered, shifting his gaze between the man and the woman. He didn't know how to answer. I don't know whom to choose. I don't want to choose, he said, tears welling up. It's all right, calm down, Andres said. If I'm planning to move to the city anyway, why don't we exchange our 2 apartments for a larger one? That way, everything will be great. Hooray! That's a great idea you came up with, Gabby brightened up immediately. And we'll all be together, like one family. Aunt Mara, are you okay with this? Of course, Margarita agreed, a bit flustered. It's just not something that can be done quickly. Don't worry. Margarita wasn't as optimistic, but not wanting to upset the child, she smiled and agreed with everything the man said. After seeing Gabby back to the orphanage, the adults exchanged glances. I probably promised something extra, didn't I? Andres asked, embarrassed. I don't know. It was necessary to reassure Gabby, of course, but how are you going to manage now? I don't know. And should I? The idea, really, isn't entirely unreasonable. In any case, it might take quite a while before it's implemented, and we'll see how things go from there. Yes, you're probably right. Your plan was just so unexpected that I got a bit flustered. I need to focus on the adoption and everything else. Let it all unfold as it will. Not everything depends on our desires. It took quite a bit of time for their plans to come to fruition. The adoption of Gabby was the fastest part. Margarita prepared well and soon became the official mother of the boy she befriended in such an unusual way. However, dealing with the rest turned out to be much more time-consuming, but after 2 years, Margarita, Andres, and Gabby were already living in a spacious 4-bedroom apartment, like a regular complete family. A united and happy family. Margarita and Andres got married, officially becoming Gabby's parents, a role they were gradually getting used to. Each of them had experienced substantial losses, which taught them to value family, kinship, good relationships, and each other, of course. Margarita was getting ready to celebrate her jubilee. She turned 45. The main and dearest gift was a card from Gabby, on which it was written, "Mommy, I love you." He called her mom for the first time. Mara placed the card on the shelf next to the one she found among Daniel's belongings. "Everything is good with us," she silently said to her elder son. "Are you happy, my dear?"
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.